So a lot of these technologies, if you put them in the home and they send data to a clinician, your clinician's not necessarily going to get paid for viewing that data, and it is a lot of data to look at. And so a lot of the legislation around accountable care organizations, medical homes, bundled payments, start to incent us towards a system of paying for value of service delivered as opposed to a volume. And I think adoption of those payment models will really drive the innovation, because at this point I think it's a little bit pressured. I think a lot of the business model is always one of the questions that comes up. You know, this is a great device, what does your business model look like? Oftentimes it's direct to consumer. And again, even direct to consumer is the person who you're selling to isn't necessarily the person who's going to use it, they're buying it for somebody else. So I think that is a hurdle. I think we're getting there, but we've got a ways to go.
I would say there are a couple things, and one is that we must be very careful about how we define M-Health, wireless health, and what we expect. It's for managing health. This is more data than we've ever had before. It's going to help you when you get feedback. It's going to help your clinician. But we can't expect this to be used for acute care, and that's where lots of people get caught up. What if I'm out of coverage? What if the cell phone's down? Well, we're looking for trends with this. If you're that sick, you should stay in the hospital. We're working right now, for example, on a 30-day post-operation kit for patients that have had open heart surgery. So when they go home, they're going to be compliant, we know that. So we want to be able to give them an Android phone and a biometric strap that measures heart rate, ECG, motion scale, and a blood pressure cuff. So with this, we expect that they will hopefully get more data than we've ever had, and we'll cut down on hospital readmissions. So the return on investment is immediate. I think it's something like 60% of post-op heart attack patients are back within the hospital. So we need to balance the benefit of that immediate ROI with the fact that you got a cell phone. Well, if the doctor let that person go, the doctor thinks they're safe. So this is where lots of people get caught up. So I think that's one issue we have to get off the table. This is looking for trends, and it's for managing health. I know more about my car than I know what's going on with me right now. So that's the first. I think the second is that, to your point, we need to come up with business models. And I think the missing component, which will come soon, will be the emotional component. What's going to make me pay $30 a month to take my blood pressure, take my weight, and manage and watch my activity? What will come are programs and maybe on Facebook, or it might be on some other venues, where my activity is correlated with my blood pressure. Suddenly I realize, my God, I haven't run in a week. Maybe what I need to do at this conference is take lunch and maybe walk for 15, 20 minutes. It's little developments like that. And there was Dave Whitlinger at Intel, the first chairman of Continuum, that brought one of the greatest terms I've ever heard, course correction. There are little components we can change in our lifestyle. You can't expect people to change their lifestyle. When you look at chronic diseases, they have the chronic disease because of their lifestyle. They're drinking too much, they're eating too much, they're doing whatever. So if we can make small corrections but have that feedback, but we have to make it fun. For example, I have a twin brother in Northern California. I'd love to have a program that would compare our activity, our blood pressure, and bring that in. Or patients like me, what we learned in Mexico was that these women banded together because they all had high blood pressure and they all had diabetes, and they got it under control. So it's that social networking component that's the next piece that we feel people will pay for, to your point. It's not going to be the clinician. Everyone looks at the doctor and says, how do I get my doctor involved? Well, you're not, because they already have too much to do, they're underpaid, they're overworked. How can you go into your doctor and say, look, what do you think about this? Here's my blood pressure, I increased my activity, now what do I do? So we need to really empower ourselves with a lot of this.
I think from a medical industry business point of view, several of the things that people have said here are talking about how do you make a treatment more effective, how do you make people more involved, how do you get the individual users more active in their own treatment, and all of that helps with the effectiveness. And I think that coming back to the key word and your question, sort of what's the big problem is, all of these things that you want to add to the system add more complexity. And so it's how do you manage that complexity, and I think course correction is a good term for what we're focused on, which is as you're developing software to build all of these systems, build all of this functionality, how do you find out as soon as possible that you've got a problem in the software and fix it the same day the code is written, instead of waiting until months or years later after it's gone through approval, after it's gone out to being used in a customer's hands. And even organizations, I didn't mention Android before, but Android's been mentioned multiple times. Even organizations like Google, whose specialty is software and algorithms, that's really what their company's built on. They didn't go and build a telephone operating system from scratch. They started with the Linux kernel. So they used work that had been done by somebody else and built on top of that. So even organizations who say that is their core competency avoid starting from scratch and building all that complexity themselves. So everyone, I think, needs help with that.
Well, cool. Do you have anything that you'd like to add on key challenges? I think we're having technical difficulty.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's on this end, I can't. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, good, thank you. Oh, so I guess you saw my testimony, but no voice coming through. Is that calling a service? Maybe. So, I agree completely with folks who just mentioned about the business model, the need for business model, the need for having effective treatment plans and effective treatment methods. I think one of the key fundamental things that Mike touched upon, which is kind of intriguing for me, is, and I didn't think about it this way until Mike mentioned about the hardware work that you've done, done very rigorous quality management or risk management because it costs more money. And the concept for that software in the software world is it's so easy to make those changes, and it's so easy to make those corrections online. I think we should use that as an advantage towards making it safe. But that does not say to that effect that we should ignore the initial exposure of that risk in software without actually thinking through it. So I think we start off as where hardware leaves off, but have the advantage of taking it into the next level of being able to fix it before a lot of folks get exposed to hazard situations. I think that's the key thing. One thing I didn't hear is, or I think I heard it indirectly, is behavioral training or behavioral changes that technology can make. I think that's an interesting area, and I've seen a couple of examples already from various academics that's going to affect obesity, that's going to affect substance abuse, and even some other parts of behavioral change that we want to do as patients for managing your chronic disease or preventing chronic. But I think the key point is with technology, what comes with information, and information is going to come really quickly, especially with mobile technologies and mobile phones and other ways of getting that information to you. I think that's the key there in terms of how do you get, as a medical device industry and as a medical device community, to help lower the cost of healthcare and also promote patients to take care of themselves as technology becomes more available for folks.
I'm going to take the conversation a little more global. We've kind of talked in terms of kind of very Western perspective. I was recently in China, and I was having a conversation with another editor who's based in Beijing, and he was telling me that one of the medical device companies, I'll leave them unnamed, came to China to do a medical test for their device. And they were able to get a sample of 60 million people for the device. Well, I'm curious about how you see kind of the competitive nature in a global market in terms of medical device development and any challenges you see kind of competing globally.
Well, okay. Well, naturally, of course, Intel is also considering the China market, and we see that as being a big, obviously big opportunities relative to the numbers. I think what's interesting about it, though, is that many of their requirements, look at FDA, look at our requirements as a base. Okay, so in that you have a huge sample. I think because I mean, as I always try to, at least when I'm in conversation with folks, I always say, well, there's kind of 300 million Americans or people here in the United States, and there happens to be one 1.3, 1.5 billion over there. So